Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into Morons and a Mic. Sorry, it's been a minute. We've had a little bit of gap between episodes just due to, you know, life things happening. Um, I am exhausted. I didn't watch an ounce of football yesterday. I just got back from a Cub Scout trip with my kiddo, and I'm just tired and don't want to do anything. But how about you, Ted?
Well, the 18-month-old woke up with a fever last night, so if the folks at home hear some crying, well, apologize ahead of time. He's in the other room with his mama, and he's been a little bit cranky today, as one might expect from an 18-month-old that's not feeling good.
Yeah, but you made his hair look good. I saw
That's right.
that. He styled his hair yesterday. Looked pretty snazzy. With that being said, let's get into some football.
Let's
Get
do
into
it.
some fantasy football stuff since we haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with Thursday night football.
Yeah, Thursday night football. So let's talk about my boy Bo Nix first of all. So whatever you think of his real life quarterbacking ability, he is a good fantasy option at this point. He continues to get rushing yards. This last game, he had 75 more rushing yards, which we know are those are the most valuable yards that a quarterback can have. So he's probably going to finish as another top 10-ish fantasy QB, and he's done it in each of the last 2 weeks. So, it's one of those. I know it's not necessarily the prettiest to watch, but at the
Mm,
same time, the results are the results. And if you're looking for a spot starter or something like that, you could definitely do worse than Bo Nix. You
this is
know,
true. I want to point out for reference, Bo Nix has more fantasy points than Jordan Love,
yeah.
and the
And
same
Patrick
amount of fantasy
Mahomes.
points as Kyler Murray.
And more than Patrick Mahomes too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most people in the
exciting.
league have more fantasy points than Patrick
That's
Mahomes.
also true. And it did not get better last night, which we'll get into
Yeah.
a little bit, or yesterday.
Daniel Jones has more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes, okay?
And he got benched for Drew Lock.
He did.
That's exciting. So,
Javante Williams,
yeah,
the demise of Javante Williams has been greatly exaggerated. And I will admit I was one of those that was ready to give up on him at the start of the year. He didn't look great. And in this game, last two games, he's looked fantastic.
I think the biggest issue for me with Javante entering the season was all the running backs that they had. Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Beatty even was a thing for a little bit there. They drafted Blake
Right.
Watson even in the draft. It was a lot of. It just seemed like a lot of things were going into fixing the running back position. Now, I think it helped solidify things when Audric Estime went on IR after fumbling in his first carry. And then he fumbled again in this last game, so he's two fumbles on 9 carries, which is
Not great.
not
Not
great.
great.
Yeah,
No. It's not
it's
really what you want to
analysis
do.
right there. That's why people come here, Cody, is for the hard hitting analysis.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bad. He might get banned into the shadow realm of Sean Payton's hate box, and I still don't necessarily trust the Broncos' backfield just because Sean Payton has a history of this dating back to New Orleans days,
Right.
where he just rotates who his guy is on a weekly basis. It seems. Now, if Javante gets this kind of usage on a weekly basis, like a couple weeks in a row, yeah, I'm going to trust it. And today,
Yeah.
obviously, it was a great proving step for him, I guess, because there aren't a lot of guys capable of doing what he did.
And honestly, it's the Broncos defense is so good that it's putting them in really good field position to just do what they want to do in that Sean Payton offense, which is run the damn ball.
Yeah, and they don't have to score a lot of points because the defense isn't
Mm.
giving up a lot of points. So, yeah, just like you said, it's really really good for them. From the Saints side, we'll get into that real quick. Oh man, it's super bad. The injuries, they're unreal for the Saints right now. The injuries just won't quit coming for them. They were down their top 3 interior offensive linemen. They were down at one point to their third string guard. They were obviously missing Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Derek Carr. It's just like people might be asking themselves, is he going to be okay? Kamara's going to be fine. His usage is good, but it's going to be a way lower ceiling than we saw in those first couple weeks until the offense around him gets healthier. Because right now that offense can't do anything. Obviously, Shaheed
Yeah, Shaheed's out
is
for the year.
he's out for the year. Should be
I
back
haven't
next year.
seen anything about Carr coming back yet.
No, it'll probably be. I would be surprised if he's back next week. But for those dynasty managers out there, Rashid Shaheed would be a good buy low target right now because what he did in those first 6 games was real. Like he was out targeting, he was getting more targets than Chris Olave. And yeah, I know everybody's going to remember the goose egg in what was it, week 3 or 4 when he had
Mm-hmm.
0. But
Yeah.
aside from that, he was getting shorter targets. He was getting intermediate targets. He was getting like 8, 10 targets per game, like that. That's real usage. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. They just extended him. It wasn't a huge deal, admittedly, but the Saints like him. He's fantastic at what he does. I think it's going to be okay. And
Yeah.
I also want to say, um, we've talked on this show about how Dennis Miller hates Kendra Miller, or
Dennis
Dennis
Allen.
Allen. Sorry, Dennis Allen
Yeah.
hates Kendra Miller. He
He
almost
almost complimented him.
a full compliment. He said Kendra Miller ran really well. We gave him the ball. Good things happened. But I wish
But
he'd
I
get contact.
wish. But I wish. Honestly, this matchup was just a matchup between two of my least favorite coaches in the league.
Yeah.
And I mean, it played out as I'd expect. Dennis Allen has no business being a head coach in this league. Free my boy Kendrick Miller, please.
No joke.
Somebody.
And it's
Somebody.
extra bad because, as we've talked about, he also hated A.T. Perry, but they cut A.T. Perry like 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So now all of Dennis Allen's hate is directed at Kendra Miller, just all of it.
Yeah.
100% hate all the time for Kendra Miller.
All right, let's move on to the one more thing. You can hold on to Cortland Sutton, but he is a volume play only.
Yep.
He is going to get targets from Bo Nix every week, and he'll get more if the game plan means they're down. But it's literally just volume. That's all.
Yeah,
So,
the ceiling is capped pretty good in that offense for receivers, just because of the just the lack of explosion that they've got.
hey,
Bo's still learning.
he's got less fantasy points than Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill doesn't have a quarterback.
For a coach willing to, we'll talk about him too.
We'll talk about that in a
Talk
little
about
bit.
him, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the London game. Why don't they just move the Jags to London already?
I mean, honestly, yeah, they should.
I mean,
Clearly
they've been
the
there for
Jags
like
do.
3 weeks already, right?
Yeah, the Jags have clearly got a lot of experience playing in London. They
It's a
enjoy playing in
home field
London.
advantage for them.
It is. It really is. All the Jags fans are out there because they've been out there more. So all the people in England, they get saddled with that just garbage franchise. I'm so sorry. And just move them out there. Like, I don't think the
Yeah,
people of Jacksonville would be too terribly upset about it.
no. Drake May looked pretty good from some of the clips that I've seen on Twitter. Again, I didn't watch an ounce of football this weekend. I was out camping.
Drake May
So,
did look good. He showed the mobility that he had at UNC. In fact, people underestimate his scrambling ability. He had the second highest scramble percentage out of all the QBs to come out in this past draft, behind only Jaden Daniels. The guy can run. He can move, and we saw a lot of that ability here. And we saw the strong arm. We saw mostly good decisions. Obviously, there's going to be some things that he's a rookie. He's not going to be the most accurate QB in the world yet. His footwork still needs some work, but he brings a much higher ceiling to that offense than Jacoby Brissett did. Jacoby Brissett had 2 touchdowns in 5 games. Drake May has had multiple touchdowns in each game. In fact, by fantasy points per game in his last 2 games, he would be QB6 in fantasy points per game, because a large part that rushing ability, big play ability with downfield stuff. So even though the Patriots receivers aren't great, which this game in particular, their best receiver is probably Pop Douglas, and the Patriots didn't let anybody know, but he was dealing with an illness. So he played for the first couple drives and then played 1 play in the 4th quarter. Didn't play at all other than those. So they didn't really have anybody.
poor guy had the Hershey squirts, man. Leave
I
him
mean, he might
alone.
have. He tried to tough it out, but you don't want to leave it all out on the field. You know what I mean? So
You get hit in just the wrong way, and you got to go change your pants.
that's right, or just the right way. I mean, I can't imagine that they'd want to attack you again after that. But yeah, he's their best man coverage beater. Jalen Polk is solid against man coverage, but for whatever reason, that dude can't catch a pass right now to save his life. So hopefully that solves itself because he didn't have that problem in school when he was at Washington. I also want to mention real quick that Drake May actually tied for the team lead in rushing yards in this game.
How many do you have?
18. Yep.
Not good, Bob.
Good. And
Not
from
great.
the one last note on the Patriots, I'm curious when they throw Javon Baker in there because like Kayshawn Booty isn't he's not a thing. Like
You don't like Booty?
not this Booty, no.
He was supposed
Kendrick
to be the
Bourne,
next big thing out of LSU, man.
yeah, after his freshman season, it looked like that, and then he regressed every year he was there. And then Kendrick Bourne, he's coming off of a pretty big injury, so it's like, man, just put Baker out there. Him, Douglas, and Polk have very complementary skill sets because like Baker would be a prototypical X receiver. That's what he did in college. That's what he's good
Right.
at. Beats man press coverage well. Polk and Douglas are smaller guys who are better against. Well, Polk is better against zone, and Douglas is a slot guy. He's just not big enough to play on the outside. So those three mesh really well. And like, I'm sorry, the Patriots are 1-6 right now. Like, guys, you're not going to be good. Just go
No.
ahead and see what Javon Baker can give you, because
Embrace
Kayshon
embrace
Boutte
the suck
went-
and the growing
yeah,
pains. Stop
exactly.
playing your veterans on a team that's going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, going nowhere and very fast too.
Right. Speaking of fast, Tank Bigsby is pretty good at running the football.
Yes,
I do want to note, though, that Doug EP did say that Travis Etienne is still their starting running back going forward.
But I
I
also
find that hard to believe.
I believe that he means it because I think
Because he's a
Bigsby is
terrible
a better
coach.
runner than ETN. But I don't know if you watched. Well, you said you didn't, but there was a play that Bigsby was a really bad receiver last year. I mean, just abysmal. And it did not look good when they threw him one of the passes, a little screen pass. It looked like his hands were made out of rocks. I mean, it was really, really bad. And you can see why it's like, okay, this is why Bigsby isn't a 3-down guy.
Makes sense.
He's the pure runner. He's a good runner. Can't catch the ball. Save his life.
He's a tank, not a finesse guy.
That's right.
Brian Thomas Jr. also really good.
Yep. And then at one point, I think, Lawrence only threw the ball 20 times because the Patriots defense just didn't really have any interest in stopping the run. So I think at one point the Jags ran like 20 something straight plays. I'm not sure if they threw a pass in the whole second half. To be honest with you. It was rough. People of London, honestly, that game was better than I thought it would be, but it still wasn't. It wasn't good. Wasn't good.
No. Okay.
We starting that.
Shit. I've been doing that. Anything else from this game you want to talk about?
Nope.
All right, let's move on.
I still don't want to spend time on the Jags. There's a few offenses. We'll get into some more of them later. I don't want to talk about them.
Let's move on to the Seahawks and Falcons. And I do need to apologize because I was on the Geno is not a good quarterback train when he got traded to the Seahawks and they let Russell Wilson walk. So,
I mean, I think it's you and everybody else. I remember thinking the same thing. Geno had given no reason to think that he could be anything more than a quality backup, but he has leveled up quite a bit because that Seahawks offensive line isn't good.
No.
So the fact that he's able to do what he's been doing behind that offensive line is pretty cool to see. I'm really happy for him. Kenneth Walker is a friggin' superstar. Like the biggest issue with his game the first 2 years was that he hadn't been used at all as a pass catcher. Now I don't know, it's something that we hadn't seen, right? So you don't know if he can't do it. Where like Bigsby, you saw pretty clearly he can't do it, right?
Right.
But they just hadn't used him like that. And now this year he is getting used as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And, if it's one game, you can call it a blip. Even if it's 2 games based on game script, you can still right? Like, who knows if it's real? They threw him a ball in this game, a downfield target, like in the end zone, and it was a fantastic friggin' catch by him. Mm-hmm. It was a really good route. It was a good catch. I mean, we all know he's a good runner. that part of his game is just it's not in question, never has been. But the question was, what was his ceiling? Because in a PPR format, you got to be able to catch passes to be top 5,
Right.
top 6, whatever. Well, he's catching passes now, so he's added that part to his game, and if he can stay healthy, I mean, I don't know what his ceiling is, but with Brees Hall and the Jets being completely unable to run, Bijan Robinson, we'll talk about him in a second, but he's splitting carries with Algier. Like Kenneth Walker's been kind of hogging the carries. In this last game, it was more of an even split, but he was also dealing with an illness that he was questionable for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's back to the kind of timeshare that it was in these last couple weeks before this, and he's catching passes, I mean, he might actually be running back 1. He could finish as running back 1 the rest of the season. He could do it.
Yeah, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah.
That's always been the knock against him, is that he's
Yes, absolutely. And the
always hurt.
kind of scary part is that a couple of them are the same injury. It's an oblique injury. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Just get rid of it. You don't need an oblique.
right. And then DK Metcalf, hopefully his injury isn't bad. He got carted off with a knee injury. The coach sounded optimistic, so we'll see. Obviously, with MRIs, that's where we're going to get the real info.
A lot of big injuries this week.
A lot of big injuries.
Yeah. Gino leads the league in attempts and yards passing.
Yep.
So,
but he throws he throws one touchdown
6.
a game, so he's not that high in points.
All right.
But if you're looking for a cheap fantasy starter, Geno Smith is a fantastic rest of season option because that Seahawks defense is really, really bad. So there's going to be a lot of games where they do end up throwing the ball a crap ton, and he has good weapons. Although I don't know what's up with JSN. Everybody thought, including myself, that he would have a really good year this year in Ryan Grubb's offense. He got 9 yards in this game, I think it was, on 3 catches.
Let's see.
It's been a pretty consistent lack of production aside from one game. And I'm not ready to throw in the towel yet, but...
He still had 6 targets. He still had the second most targets on the team.
It seems like it's the same short targets, and it's been an ongoing, consistent thing where he's, for whatever reason, he's not converting these targets, and teams know this. You know what I mean? So I'm a little bit concerned that Tyler Lockett is going to continue to be too involved to let JSN have that breakout that everybody thought, including myself.
And of course,
another 4 for 45 game in this game.
Yeah, and of course Lockett would do that as soon as I traded him away.
Right.
So,
but the bad part is I know you traded him to me, but it's like I don't feel comfortable starting him because DK still exists, and any moment, JSN.
All right, the Atlanta side of the ball, Bijan got almost all of the work over Algier, which a little bit of a bummer for me since I started Algier this week.
Well, this is what the backfield should be. Maybe a little bit more for maybe 70-30 or 65-30. But it was almost 50-50 before this. I'm sorry, Bijan is just too good to be splitting that like that. On multiple of these runs, I mean, it looked like he was being controlled by a joystick with the sharpness of the cuts and stuff. The guy is just an unbelievably talented player. Algier's a good player. I'm not saying Algier should never see the field by any stretch of the imagination. But Bijan is clearly more talented and brings more to this offense. He should be getting more work. That's what it is. Also, Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, that's where I was going to next. Is you think maybe all the backlash over the stats are for losers comment? Now he's like, well, man, maybe I should get my best players the ball.
Well, I do also think that I'd have to go back and look, but I know against who was it that he had his first big game against where he caught the touchdown? It was the game they threw the ball 50 times, and Cousins threw for 500 yards in that game.
Yeah, it was a Monday Night Football, I think, wasn't it?
I think so. It was on the national time slot. I can't remember if it was Monday or Thursday night, but during that game, we saw them use Pitts in different ways. We saw him use him as more of a vertical player, whereas before they'd had him run a lot of horizontal stuff. He can't, he's just too big. His limbs are too long. He can't change directions fast enough. You can't get him matched on a corner one-on-one and have him run a horizontal breaking route and expect him to win that route. I mean, we've seen it too many times. So hopefully they've learned. Again, I'd have to go back and watch the uses specifically for Pitts. But if they line him up in line, get him matched up against the linebacker, that's where Pitts can win. That's
Yeah.
where he's going to be a mismatch for that linebacker. The issue previously was that he's such a bad blocker. They didn't want to line him up in line because then he's a zero running. But
Yep.
they got to do something. Drake London's been a picture of consistency on the same side with exactly six catches in 5 out of his last 6 games, with the only one that he had more, that one that he had that insane game. He's also had, I think it's between like 55 and 73 yards receiving in 5 out of 6, and he's had 1 touchdown catch in 5 out of 6. I still think there's more there to unlock,
Mm-hmm.
as evidenced by that huge game he had. But, that's a pretty
Currently
consistent
wide receiver 3 on the year.
Yeah, that's a pretty consistent player and somebody you definitely want in your starting lineups every single week.
Makes sense. Makes sense. The Titans and the Bills played a football game.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the Bills had some bright spots with their newest addition. Cooper and Keon Coleman had a really good game, and the Titans were there.
Yes, the Titans
So
exist.
the Titans exist, and that's really all I have to say about the Titans.
We all got Mason Rudolph.
Ugh.
But yeah, so we'll skip over the Titans because that's one of the teams that I want to talk about. But from the Bills side, it was pretty interesting. Cooper, obviously he's not going to know the offense yet. He was only out there for something like 40% of the snaps, but he still had 5 targets. And so I'm really curious just how high that ceiling is, because the Bills, when they got shut down early in the season by, I'm blanking, the Jets and Texans, and who else was it? It might have been those two. Anyways, they got shut down because those teams have the man coverage guys in the secondary to just sticky tight coverage and take away those short intermediate routes. And when you have Mac Hollins on one side as your outside receiver, and you have rookie Keon Coleman, who could eventually be good, but he's not ready yet to beat press coverage because
Mm-hmm.
neither of those guys could create any separation. And then you have Khalil Shakir, who's very good against man coverage, but he was also dealing with an ankle injury for a little while. And if you only have one guy and he's in the slot, the defense can take away the middle of the field by devoting an extra body or two to that goal, because they know
Right.
that they can lock up those guys on the outside. They're not scared of Mac Hollins. They're not scared of Keon Coleman. Well, Amari Cooper is much, much, much better at creating separation. So,
Better ass.
yeah,
For
much
sure.
better ass. Well, I mean, it wasn't with Cleveland, but I think that's because he was checked out. So I'm curious to see what the ceiling is for Amari Cooper when he gets more acclimated to the offense and builds more timing with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Um,
You a little bit worried about James Cook's role in this offense?
just a little bit, just because last week, he missed that game with an injury, and Ray Davis had a really fantastic game, and I liked Ray Davis coming out of the draft. I thought he was a really good player, really great story. But when a coach sees that, like Tyrone Tracy, it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. They're going to want to play that guy
Yeah.
because they
Mhm.
need to know if they have something there. And Cook is a really good player, but it kind of felt like Ray Davis fit what they wanted to do better. Now, in this game, James Cook dominated the touches, especially before garbage time, but Ray Davis once again made the most of his touches by averaging 8 yards a carry, whereas James Cook managed 2.5, I think it was.
Mm.
Yeah, he did score a touchdown, and the Titans' run defense, especially, is really, really good.
Yeah.
But again, if you're a coach, just like we had this talk with Bucky Irving and Rashad White, now James Cook is miles better than Rashad White, but I am saying that when the efficiency of one guy is clearly better than the efficiency of the other repeatedly over time,
Yeah.
you want to get the second guy more involved. So I'm not like throwing in the towel or anything, but I just think it's an interesting situation to monitor going forward. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. He was definitely better on the ground than Cook was in this game. I know the Titans' run defense is pretty good,
Yeah, they're
but
really good.
I mean, Ray Davis was averaging 8.2 yards a carry.
Yeah. And again, it was
So he
small
definitely
samples.
made the most of his opportunities.
Yeah. But that, and he showed a little bit as a receiver last week too. He caught that one scramble ball from Josh Allen. It was like a 40-yard play downfield. So he did show some ability as a receiver. I think, James Cook is probably the better receiver, but the fact that he showed some receiving chops, he's good in pass pro. Like he has a lot of the traits that a team would want out of a 3-down back.
Yep.
So
I think it's interesting also to note that Cook didn't get a single target in this game. Ray Davis only had one, but
the
Cook didn't
receivers
have
were
any.
finally getting open. So they actually got some receiver targets going.
Right. And Khalil Shakir, the perfect 7 for 7 on his targets. So
Yep.
I still think that's the guy to own there. Let's
The
see.
rest of the season,
Moving.
I'd want Cooper, but Shakir is a close second.
Yeah. Let's go to the Bengals and Browns.
So
Zach Moss season is over.
yep. I mean, he'll still
Not
be
not he's not hurt. It's just not the guy anymore.
right. He hasn't been the guy in a little bit. The snap shares have been trending that way ever since week one, and the last 2 weeks it's both been 63 to 65% for Chase Brown. So I think we can safely say, because last week Zach Moss did get injured, he got a little banged up, and so it wasn't 100% sure, was this split because he was hurt, or was this split because Chase Brown taken over the backfield? Well, after this week, I think we can safely say that Chase Brown has taken this backfield over. So if you want one going forward, definitely would take Chase Brown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Also with the Bengals, T. Higgins getting a lot of targets as people are starting to key in on Jamar Chase, and T.
So
Higgins is benefiting.
it's really
So
interesting that T. Higgins he's gotten more targets than Jamar Chase 4 straight weeks. Now, Jamar Chase is a great player, but 4 straight weeks, that's not a blip. That's a trend at that point.
mhm.
So now I do think it's, obviously Higgins isn't as good as Jamar Chase, but you do wonder what this means for the future of the Bengals offense, because we've talked about it before, where the offense, when they only have Chase or Higgins, they look stuck in the mud. The
Mhm.
Bengals aren't paying both these guys.
No, no.
So if Higgins leaves, are we going to get the same stuck in the mud offense where teams can feel free to double chase, knowing that nobody else is really going to scare them?
Yeah, and I mean this wasn't the greatest game from Joe Burrow, but you know you're seeing him target Higgins or Chase and pretty much nobody else. So that's a little worrisome for when they finally do trade away T. Higgins because they're not going to pay him at the end of the year.
No. Although I don't know if they're going to trade him away, because they're in a really soft part of their schedule. So I think in a couple more weeks they'll be right back in that playoff picture, because the teams they've been facing are just so
Just
bad.
really bad, really bad.
The Bengals
But hey,
defense is
they only beat the Browns by 1 touchdown. So,
yes,
and this is
yes
a
they
Browns
did.
team that lost their quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Couldn't
Oh,
have went to a
anyways,
better person.
yep, so sad.
No. But
You know
who
what's
is their
funny?
quarterback going forward? Is it going to be Jameis Winston or is it going to be Dorian Thompson Robinson?
So if it's based on who's going to play better right now, Jameis Winston. But I do think that there's a chance that Cleveland wants to see what they've got in Dorian Thompson Robinson, because he has shown some flashes. It's not real
Mm-hmm.
consistent, but he's shown something, right? So Cleveland's going to want to know, on the off chance this guy is it. Well, this is a lost season for them, anyways. It was a lost season with Deshaun Watson because he's played so poorly. This is
Yeah,
weird
he's just
because
bad.
either one, whichever they pick, the offense is going to be better. Even without Amari Cooper, this offense is going to be better.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're looking for somebody on the waiver wire, you'd probably go get Cedric Tillman.
Yep.
Got 12 targets in this game. David Njoku got another 14 targets in this game. So those are going to be the guys to have from the
Well,
Browns.
remember
I don't want any of them, but
Njoku in the second half last year, when Watson was hurt with his shoulder injury,
mm-hmm.
Njoku was like tight end one over the second half of the season.
Yeah.
He was really, really good. For whatever reason, Deshaun Watson just never made great use of the tight ends. Njoku might be a buy low candidate for me. Let me rephrase that. He is a buy low candidate for me. If you can convince the manager that has him right now that his 10 catch, 70-yard, 1 touchdown game was an aberration. But if you
Right.
can do it by pointing to the rest of his season and saying, "Hey, Deshaun Watson's out,"
I mean, he
that would be
may
a
be like tight
worthwhile
end 3 right now or
endeavor.
something. Let's see.
Yeah, he's way up there. I mean, he's not ahead of Bowers for sure. I wouldn't put him ahead of Kittle. Probably wouldn't put him ahead of McBride, but I could hear the argument there. But I think those are the only three that I would like really be like the top two, Kittle and Bowers. I'm not taking him over them.
No.
But McBride, you could convince me.
You could convince
Yeah.
me.
I mean, tight end 3 or 4, that's a huge glow up for him. And
Yeah.
Cedric Tillman, that's a guy that he lines up. He's utilized a lot in the same ways that Amari Cooper was, where he lines up outside on the X spot. So it's something that now that Cooper's gone, this kid he had an intriguing profile picture or an intriguing profile, and I actually had him in our 12-team dynasty because I did think he was an interesting player, and he played well when he got the chance last year. He had a couple games where he played really well when Cooper was out, but I traded him away because when I did that, there was no inkling that Cooper was going to be gone. And now I wish that maybe I hadn't done that. It was maybe a mistake.
Hindsight's 2020. Hindsight
Yeah.
is definitely 2020. I think we spent enough time on the Browns.
Yep.
I
I think
don't
you're
I don't
probably
like
right.
spending any more time on the Browns. Texans Packers was an interesting game. I I don't know what the Texans are doing here. I don't get it.
So this goes back to the play caller stuff, and we'll get into the Commanders one later. But Poppy Slowick, he was talked about as a possible head coaching candidate after last year because of the work he did with Stroud. Well, first and second down, we talked about this on one of the earlier episodes. They weren't very good by success rate, EPA per play, nothing on first and second down said that was a good offense. Stroud bailed them out a bunch on third down, and the hope was, with Joe Mixon, an improved running game, healthier offensive line, that this team would be more consistent on first and second down so that Stroud wouldn't have to be superhuman on third down because, yeah, he can do it, but it's not ever going to lead to super consistent offense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mixon's been everything advertised and more. Like, he's had 3 completely healthy games. He's at least 26 fantasy points in each. He's been super efficient. I think it's like 5 yards a carry or some huge number like that. He hasn't just been, one of those touchdown plunger guys or PPR scammer catching 12 passes like Kamara did last year, and that's why he's valuable. It hasn't been the case. But this year's Texans offense, despite a healthier offensive line than they had last year, is worse on first and second down. And like to the point that like they're even Stroud can't save him on third downs against better defenses. And it's not like the Packers were a crazy good defense.
No.
They're middling defense in pressure, but they had him under siege all day long. Like, there was just nowhere for him to go. He didn't have a clean pocket. Like, this team has a lot to figure out, and Slowick is a really concerning point for me right now because it feels like he's regressed a little bit. Because, you think about all the things that have gone right for this team. Joe Mixon came in. He obviously is a friggin' superstar. Like, he's everything they could have hoped. Nico Collins was a revelation. Like, he was good
Mm-hmm.
last year. He leveled up multiple spots. He was playing like a top 5 receiver in the NFL before he pulled his hamstring.
Yeah.
And yeah, Diggs and Dell, they're not like Diggs isn't the player he was 2 years ago, but he's still a good player. Dell, he doesn't look the same as he did last year, coming off that big injury and get shot in the leg. But he's still a good player. They have good players. He's just not putting them in a position to succeed.
No. And it reminds me a lot of the OU offense right now. The Sooners offense is we're going to try to do a little QB draw or a run right up the middle, get maybe a yard, if that, on first down. Second down, they take a shot downfield, 30 yards, miss it. And then on third down, they're stuck in 3rd and 10, 3rd and long.
I gotta
It's
say,
every time.
the difference is that OU's QBs are not CJ Stroud. Because
This is
Stroud,
true.
he has worse stats than last year, but he's playing better than he did last year. Like, you watch CJ Stroud, he's so much better just creating on the run and on the move and manipulating the
Yeah.
pocket. He's leveled up several spots as a passer.
He didn't show it in this game. He did not show it in this game. 10
Well,
for 21, less than 100 yards.
again, he was.
Anthony
was
Richardson played better than he did this week.
I'm going to push back on that. Stroud played pretty well. at least relative to his numbers. Richardson, those numbers tell an accurate story. With Stroud, those numbers don't tell an accurate story. If a player is under pressure on over half of his dropbacks, as he was, they're really not like that's not a functional offense at that point. And then you throw in the fact that like Dell had a drop in the end zone. I mean, it wasn't. I don't think it'll be classified as a drop. It would have been a tough catch, but it's a catch that Dell, I'm sure, would tell you that he should make. He expects himself to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a lot of things that just it wasn't great. And then they would get into third and long or whatever. Whenever they got into an obvious passing situation, they just couldn't hold up.
Makes sense. Jordan Love is still fun to watch. He's going to get you a couple touchdowns and a couple of interceptions every game.
Yeah, every single one. He's leading the NFL in interceptions right now with 8, and he missed 2 games.
Josh Jacobs is still really good at running the
Josh
ball.
Jacobs had his first career receiving touchdown in this game. Took him 211 receptions to do it, but he did it. And Romeo Doubs, I got to say, we've talked about the Packers receiver room before.
Yep.
Romeo Doubs might be the guy to own because those other guys, they don't really play those other guys at X. Doubs, he never leaves the field. And in those last 2 games, he's been more involved in the offense. I'm not sure if that's a coincidence after he got suspended.
Yeah, after he decided to stay home and not show up.
Yes. But he has been getting more involved. In this last game, he had 8 catches for 94 yards, which were both season highs. So, this is something to keep a lookout. I don't know if I'd really be dying to start him in a 10-team league if you have better options. But if you're really desperate, certainly a good enough spot to go.
And can we talk about the uniforms? Those white Green Bay uniforms are ugly.
Yeah,
I do not like them at all.
Uniforms. I'm trying to purge them from my memory. So thank you.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the Dolphins and Colts. They played a game. It happened. I think that's really all you need to say about it.
I do have a thought for each team. So I know in a couple episodes ago we talked about how Mike McDaniels is having an issue creating things. Well, in this game against the Colts defense that makes everybody look like stars, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle combined for 0 targets in the first half. How, if you are a coach of that team, how do you make it through an entire half without throwing the ball even once to either of those guys? They both finished with 1 catch.
Odell Beckham Jr. had the same amount of targets as Tyreek Hill and Jaden Waddle.
Yeah. That is super concerning for me because the offense doesn't look like it's gotten any different from last year. So even when Tua comes back, are we really sure that it's going to look like the offense from the beginning of last year? I don't know about all that.
He can't come back fast enough. It's really it's going to be the only saving grace for Hill and Waddle is if Tua comes back and plays like he did last year.
It might be a good time to deal Hill and Waddle with Tua's returns. Rumored he might be back next week, but it might be a good idea to deal. Just see what's out there and see if you can get a package that you like for one or both of those guys. Because from what we've seen so far, I don't have a lot of confidence that Mike McDaniel is going to get this figured out this year.
No, and it's when you're throwing Huntley and Tim Boyle out there as your quarterbacks, having them both play a half, basically. Yeah. It's really bad for you. For the Colts, Anthony Richardson is still he's just a bad quarterback.
Yeah.
He's good at running the ball, but he's just a bad quarterback. He's not good at throwing the ball to people. He's good at throwing it over them.
Yeah, he's excellent at that. His deep ball, what's weird is his deep ball accuracy isn't bad. It's the short and intermediate areas that he just can't he can't function. Which, that's the point that I wanted to make here. As long as he's dealing with these accuracy issues, I don't think any of these Colts receivers are startable. Like, unless Joe Flacco's playing, in which case, Josh Downs is definitely startable.
Yep, Josh Downs had 3 targets in this game, but only had 1 catch for 3 yards.
Yep.
Pittman had a decent game, but with Richardson back there, you never know who's going to have the big game.
Yeah, because
or if anybody's going to have a decent game.
Exactly. it's all built on deep balls because he's only completing 10 to 15 passes a game because he can't hit more than 50%. So there's just not that many catches to be spread around. So if you're counting on one of these guys, especially a guy like Pittman, who doesn't work the deep part of the field really, you're counting on catches. He's not going
Yeah,
to get enough catches
it's
to do that. Josh Downs, the same way. He doesn't really work the deep part of the field. He needs catches to be, fantasy relevant. A guy like Alec Pierce, who is running the deep stuff, that's your guy where you're like, yeah, he is a boomer bust player because he might catch a 50-yard touchdown. He might.
what do you think his completion percentage is on the year right now?
God, isn't it like 40% or something like that?
It's
45
close.
maybe.
It's close. He's about 50, just under 50%. He's
Is it still 50?
49 for 101.
Yeah. Okay.
101
Well,
attempts, 49 completions.
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's bad.
Not great, Bob. Not great. All right,
Not
Lions
yet.
and Vikings was actually a decent game. If you look at the box score, because I didn't watch it, but
It was.
talk to me a little bit about this game and what you saw.
So it was really cool because Jared Goff has struggled with Brian Flores' defense. We've talked about Brian Flores and how good he is as a defensive coordinator, defensive play caller, all that. He's given Goff fits in the past. He was the defensive coordinator, for example, in the Super Bowl that the Patriots
Mm-hmm.
played them. He was the defensive coordinator for the Rams when the Rams, or not Rams, I'm sorry, the Dolphins, or he was the head coach of the Dolphins, but I mean, he was calling defense when the Rams basically gave up on Goff. Goff threw 2 picks and fumbled twice against that Brian Flores led Dolphins team. And then that's when Sean McVay started to get fed up with Goff. And 2 months later, they were starting, God, what was his name? John Wofford. There we go. John Wofford in a playoff game over Jared
Yeah,
Goff. So, like it was really cool to
good
see.
old days.
Yeah, the simpler times. It was really cool to see Goff come out and really he was dealing, and they were pressuring him. This is a game that Goff of last year even like I've sent you and Robert his numbers under pressure before the Super Bowl folds like a house of cards. This
Yes.
game he did not. He was under pressure on 50% of his dropbacks in this game, but he was buying time. He was moving as well as Jared Goff can move. He's not ever going to win any foot races, but he was doing the pocket manipulation, which he's gotten a lot better at. Like the touchdown, the deep touchdown, 35-yard touchdown it was to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He
Yep.
slid in the pocket. He bought himself some time, and he hit him down the field. Like all those things, fantastic news for the Lions. We know about the Lions running backs. I'm not going to cover them. But I am going to say I'm not sure if anybody's lost more value in dynasty football than Sam Laporta, who was the dynasty tight end one entering the year and continues to get 1, 2, 3 targets per game. In this game, he had 2. The touches for Amon-Ra, they're safe. We knew, I said this before, Amon-Ra's not going to lose touches.
No, he's too good.
Yep, Gibbs and Montgomery, they're
He's
not losing
your
touches.
sure-handed receiver. It's always going to get his work. And it's a little concerning that Tim Patrick is starting to get the same amount of looks and targets and everything that Sam Laporta is.
Jameson Williams is like a boom bust guy, but they really used him a lot in those first 2 weeks. And I've said it before, I think it was kind of an experimentation phase for them because his first read target share has fallen back to where you'd expect for a deep ball guy like him. So I'm not I'm not too concerned, but at the same time, I think people need to reset their expectations on Jameson Williams from what it was in the first 2 games where it looked like he was going to be a league winner. I think he's back to being a boom bust wide receiver 3, 4 flex guy where you're hoping for a long touchdown, and if he doesn't get that, he's not going to get the catches to make himself have a good week. But if he catches a long ball, there's like 15 points.
Yep. He was 1 for -4
Yes.
in this game.
You and I technically had more receiving yards than he did.
Exactly. And that's telling you something. I do think Ben Johnson's going to be gone next year. I think he's going to be a head coach somewhere.
We thought that last year too, though.
That's true. But I don't know.
Hey,
They looked great.
Give my boy Caleb Williams Ben Johnson.
We'll take him over in the Niners. I'm about done with Shanahan. Minnesota looked good. Sam Darnold still looks okay. Looks good enough. He's not
he actually
going to
played.
be out there and be your league winner for fantasy, but for actual NFL stuff, he looks good.
He looked really good, and that was one of the. I think I brought up the point in our last episode that he'd yet to throw a pass when trailing this year.
Mhm.
Well, this game he was trailing, and his first one, or one of his first like 5 passes, I think it was, he did make a bad decision and get picked. But aside from that, he had like an 80% completion percentage, and that was the only bad pass he had. Like Darnold really played really well, it's especially considering that the Lions have a bit of a pass funnel defense in that their run defense is really good. I know Aaron Jones had a really nice game. That's more a reflection on Aaron Jones. But, you know, they got down early against the Lions and they fought back. Like Darnold played really, really well. They got Jalen Naylor involved, who we've mentioned as like an ass superstar. He's got superstar ass,
Yes.
and he actually got 4 catches in this game for 76 yards, I think it was. So, you know, obviously we know about Justin Jefferson. There's not really much to rehash there. Aaron Jones, not much to rehash there. We've talked about him being a friggin' fantasy stud as long as he's healthy, which is the issue for him.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to, who's after Jefferson. Is
Yep.
it going to be Jalen Naylor? Is it going to be Jordan Addison? And I think it's going to be a week-to-week thing.
I
One
think
week's going to be Addison. He's not going to get the same amount of volume that Naylor's going to get, I think, but he's going to be very much your longer touchdown dependent guy.
He had a 51-yard catch in this game.
Yeah.
So I do think that you're pretty spot on with that.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about in this game?
Nope. This next one is like the Super Bowl of sadness.
The Eagles and Giants. Man, I don't know. I don't know what to say about this game. I know Jalen Hurts hasn't always been regarded as a great quarterback, especially in college. He wasn't like that superstar quarterback. He was just good enough. And I think that's what we're starting to see here in the NFL is that he's good enough to win some games, but he's not going to put the team on his back and go win you a bunch.
So what I saw from Jalen Hurts, because we'll get into the lone bright spot in this game here in a little bit. What I saw from Hurts is in college he leveled up every year. He got better every year. You know, from Alabama to OU, and then in the NFL every year he got better. First I think it was 3 years he improved every year. Well, I think we've pretty much seen him level off because at this point the only way for him to get better is to be better about reading a defense, faster at reading a defense. He is just not able to do it, which is why this offense right now that they're running under Kellen Moore, who runs a very different offensive system than, last year's version or the year before's version of the Eagles offense. It looks pretty much the same. If you look at like AJ Brown's route charts, go balls all day long. That's what he gets targeted on. They don't do anything to put him in the intermediate middle of the field because Hurts can't read that. And that's really holding this offense back. Like in this game, one of the reasons that despite Saquon having the best game of his year so far against his old team, he had 187 scrimmage yards on 19 touches. The Giants as a team had 119. So good job on that one, Giants.
Yeah.
But Hurts, he just hasn't progressed as far as reading the field goes. Just hasn't done it.
But, I mean, you can't start Kenny Pickett over him. So
No. And his average time to throw was something like ludicrously high, like 3.2 seconds, which is a reflection of a quarterback who doesn't know what he's seeing.
Fair enough. I don't think we need to talk about the New York side of the ball other than Daniel Jones got benched for Drew Lock, who
I don't even want to talk about that.
Looked terrible.
We'll talk about Tyrone Tracy. Had like
Daniel Jones still has more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes. Tyrone Tracy has taken over this backfield from Singletary. Singletary was back. He's healthy. Tyrone Tracy is outplaying him.
And Dable said as much that he had earned significant playing time going forward, but it was still nice to see it in practice. And I know the box score is going to make him look even, relatively even, but Tyrone Tracy had like an 80% snap share when Daniel Jones was in, which is the ostensible starter. Mm-hmm. So that is probably a really good indication, especially coming off those 2 weeks that he had, that's probably what the backfield is going to look like going forward.
Yeah. Malik Neighbors is back pretty quiet in this game, 441, but he still had 8 targets.
Yeah.
So
well,
he's still getting.
When your quarterback can't get the ball out before getting sacked. I think he got sacked like 6 or 7 times in this game.
Yeah, Jones took 7 sacks.
Yeah. He held on to the ball way too long. Not all those were on the offensive line, although the offensive line did not play well at all. Andrew
Yeah.
Thomas is out for the rest of the year with a foot injury, so it's going to be bad. Evan Neal continues to look like a huge miss. He was drafted 7th overall by them in 2022, and even after Andrew Thomas didn't play, he still didn't play a single snap in this game. Evan Neal, even
Hmm.
though he's healthy, that's a huge miss.
Gotta love it. Raiders and Rams played a game.
Yep, we're going to skip
Uh,
right over that one.
yeah. Brock Bowers is really good at football.
Yes, he is.
And Cooper Cup. Did Cooper Cup play?
He did not.
Okay.
Yeah,
He'll
he was
he'll
out.
hopefully be back soon, and the Rams will start looking a little bit better. But yeah, I don't even want to talk about this game. Panthers and
So,
Commanders. Panthers just look awful.
yep.
We had a little bit of a bright spot when we got Andy Dalton and we looked at Deontay Johnson getting all those targets. And we're like, hey, we might have something here. We did not have anything there.
We did what we don't anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was fool's gold. They
it
tricked
was.
us. They tricked us, and we were bamboozled. Bryce
Hey,
Young came back in this game
yep.
and was 2 for 2 for -4 yards.
Yeah.
2 for 2 for -4 yards.
Yeah. Hey, if it's like golf and the low score wins, then he's doing great.
It's ridiculous. Um, Chuba Hubbard still looks good.
Yep. This is the first game he didn't have at least 4 catches since week 1. So, he didn't put up the totals that he has in the last couple weeks, but he's pretty consistently been involved in the pass game. I am interested to see, because Brooks is getting closer to coming back, I am interested to see what that split looks like when Brooks is healthy.
I
And
also
now,
don't know what they're doing as a team, to begin with, because if you look at it, they lost 40-7
yeah,
and they threw the ball 18 times. Hubbard had 17 carries, Miles Sanders had 3, and Xavier Legette had 1. So they ran the ball
yep.
more than they passed while losing 40-7.
Look, man, it didn't make a lot of sense to me either. I watched that game because we'll talk about the Commanders side here in a second. And I watched that game.
I know you watched that game because you love Marcus Mariota.
Yes, I love my boy Marcus and Jaden Daniels. He left with a rib injury. Early returns are that it's not broken, but that he's still going to get an MRI, which does raise the possibility that it's that same injury that Justin Herbert had 2 years ago, where it's like a rib cartilage issue, which is a
Yeah.
much more painful and longer term injury even than a broken rib. So honestly, broken rib probably would have been better because you can play through that with a rib block and stuff like that. But Mariota, I gotta eat my crow on Cliff Kingsbury. We talked a lot of shit on him, and me in particular, over the first
I
2
was
weeks.
going to say, you talk a lot of shit on
As
him.
I said, me in particular. But he's been so much better than he was with Arizona. So much better. And it continued in this one. Like, he was letting Mariota throw the ball. Mariota looked decisive. His arm strength isn't what it once was because of all the injuries he had in Tennessee. But he's decisive, got the ball out on time. They ran the same offense with him that they did with Jaden Daniels. Terry McLaurin still had a really, really nice game with 98 receiving yards, even with, Mariota being basically the only person to throw him any passes. I think he caught one for a couple yards from McLaurin. I think it was like 1 catch for 3 yards from him. The rest of all that was Marcus. And
Mhm.
so that looked really good. The running game was really nice. Brian Robinson's been nursing a knee injury the last couple weeks. He had 12 carries for 71 yards and touchdown. Like, this offense just looks so well designed, so good, plays to its player strengths.
Ben Sinnott even got into the action here. Ben Sinnott with 2 catches and a touchdown.
Honestly, we might have broken the space-time continuum and gone back to 2014 a little bit there or 2013 because Marcus Mariota threw a touchdown to Zach Ertz, or 2012. I'm sorry. So that was a really fun moment for me to relive that portion of my life, that game.
Yeah. Oregon quarterback throwing to a Stanford tight end.
Yeah, to the Stanford tight end that caught the overtime touchdown pass I think it was fourth quarter, caught the touchdown pass that allowed Stanford to take it to OT and win the game.
Yeah.
And knock Oregon out of the college football national championship. because that was their only loss that year.
Good old Stanford back when they actually looked like a competent team. Yeah, I hope Jaden Daniels comes back healthy.
Yeah,
Even with only throwing the ball twice in this game and getting knocked out pretty early, he is still QB2 on the year.
yeah. He had a 40 something yard run to get 50 rushing yards before he left.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's gonna do the things. He's gonna do the things that make him valuable in fantasy football.
All right, let's move on to the Chiefs and 49ers. This is a bit of a sore spot for me. I am about done with the Kyle Shanahan experiment. He Listen, this is non-fantasy related, okay? But the man can scheme up plays like no other, but he cannot win against the Chiefs. He cannot beat the Chiefs, and he's got terrible clock management.
So
I just don't get it. I think he's a great offensive coordinator, but I don't think he's head coach material.
So I think it's got more to do with the trades that the Niners have made. If you look at the two rosters that you're talking about, the Chiefs and the Niners, the Chiefs have one of the youngest rosters in football. They've drafted very, very well, especially on the defensive side. They've built around Mahomes' big contract with cheap, cost-controlled talent that they've used and then signed to extensions. The Niners, on the other hand, have traded up in the draft repeatedly throughout Shanahan and Lynch's tenure. And that, like I know they hit on Purdy, which helped negate the Trey Lance thing, but they still traded 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance.
Yep.
Yeah, you hit on Purdy, and that's great, but that's only one of those 3 first-round picks. Those other 2 guys would be probably cost-controlled, starters. They traded a second, a third, and a fourth for McCaffrey. That's not talent they have access to anymore. So they are one of the oldest rosters in the NFL. Their players are really good, so that's fine. But then you get games like that game the other day where Deebo Samuel played 3 snaps and left the game with an illness. Jawan Jennings was inactive with a hip. Brandon Ayuk suffered a really bad looking knee injury, which I hope he gets better soon.
Yeah.
McCaffrey didn't play. Kittle's 31 years old. There's a lot of stuff here that, again, they have a great roster, but it's getting older, and all the trades, because they've traded up repeatedly in the draft. The Chiefs do the opposite. They trade down a lot. I'm sure they've traded up before. Obviously, they traded up from Mahomes, but they don't generally trade up unless it's an impact position like quarterback. They trade down, accumulate more picks, and then they draft well, too. If you look at the Chiefs' defensive secondary especially.
Yes.
You got
And that's
7
something that the Niners have just ignored. There's 2 positions very important on the field that the Niners have just completely ignored in the draft. That's offensive line,
Yeah.
and cornerbacks.
So corner, they did take Diamador Lenore out of my Oregon, and he's played well.
Mm-hmm.
But they need more because obviously, like one of the things that makes the Chiefs so good, they go 5 deep in corners. They can run out 5 corners. It's not really a big deal to them if you have multiple receivers. That defense is super well coached. Spags is awesome. The Niners defense, not as
has
well
a lot
coached.
of talent there, but the coaching from Brandon Staley is a bit of an issue.
Well, you're also seeing the drop off. They look at their defensive line of a couple years ago, the first Super Bowl against the Chiefs. They had DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, and then Buckner needed a new contract. They didn't have the money, so they traded him for a first round pick that they used on Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw got
now
hurt
on the Jets.
that billing. Then they had to ask Eric Armstead to take a pay cut this past year. He's now with Jacksonville. They have lost a lot of talent. They still have Bosa, yes. They paid Hargrave, but they paid Hargrave partially because they missed on Kinlaw. They paid Hargrave off the Eagles $21 million a year. Torn tricep out for the year. It's just, one of the issues with older rosters is they get hurt more often because you don't get more resilient as you get older, as you and I can well attest.
My whole body hurts. I played too much Gaga ball this weekend with all those Cub Scouts.
Yeah, and I imagine football, like NFL level football. It's just that's where you're really seeing it is the difference in rosters. The Chiefs are a young ascending roster. The Niners have an older declining one. that they're missing a lot of cost-controlled talent, and then they didn't draft particularly well either over the last couple of years. They've had some hits, but it seems like if you go back and look at the Chiefs draft classes, they hit on almost every person. It's crazy.
Yeah.
They get 6, 7 impact starters from a 7, 8 person class, and that's a hit rate. It can't possibly continue, but the fact that they have done it that's their core. They've already got their core.
I am excited to see what Ricky Pearsall can do the rest of
Yep.
the year. He's got a pretty unique opportunity with all the injuries to the
He got shot in the
wide
chest,
receiver
still
room.
came back before Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Well,
We're way over.
running.
So
Yeah, we're
we'll
way
cover
over.
this last.
Let's just cover
real quick.
Steelers Jets real quick. And we both know that, listen, the Jets' problem was not in the wide receiver room. The Jets' problem was in their offensive line.
Yep. And offensive staff.
Yeah. Devontae Adams was not going to magically fix this team. Does he help? Yeah, sure. I mean, he'd help on any team. But for those who thought it was going to be an immediate, gold mine with Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, I think you just got your reality check here.
Yep. We still saw, just like to your point, you see the space, you can feel the space that Devontae Adams opens up for the rest of that offense, because teams know that he may not be what he was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but he's still a very high level player. And, teams have to devote resources to him that they can no longer, you can't double him and Garrett Wilson. You can't, cover Breece Hall out of the backfield. There's just space for these guys to play. And we saw that with Breece Hall having the game he did out of the backfield, receiving out of the backfield. But we also saw the issues with the Jets offense, which they can't block. They have a 40-year-old QB, doesn't want to hold the ball long. He doesn't use play action. He doesn't use motion. The offensive line can't run block for crap. I mean, how many times do we see Breece Hall get a handoff and then immediately get hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage? Mm-hmm. There's nowhere for him to go. That's why he had the big game he had catching the ball out of the backfield, because that's the only way to get him in space. He can't get past the line of scrimmage if not.
Yeah. The Steelers look pretty good.
Steelers did look good. I didn't like them going back to Russ or going to Russ, but it actually worked out really well. Russ didn't take the sacks. Fields, after his first couple games where he cut his sack totals down, we had talked about it. He was taking more sacks lately. He had a lot of missed opportunities. I know they mentioned it in the broadcast, but what Wilson does really well, he still does well. Even at his 36-year-old age, 37, whatever he is, which is deep shots down the sideline. He throws a great moon ball. The arc he can get on his passes makes it easier for the receiver to catch it, gives him a higher margin of error. And we saw that. George Pickens is a high-level sideline catch guy, and that was exactly what he did, which opened up space for the running game.
Yeah.
So, he was able to operate off play action. Fields was actually worse with play action than he was without play action, which is really weird. Normally, that's flipped. Russ was really, really good on play action. He didn't hold the ball super long time, which is, again, for Russ, that's impressive if he can keep doing that, being decisive. This offense is going to look a lot better with Russ than it did with Fields. Not that it's going to be a top 10 unit or anything crazy, but, that's going to bump up Najee Harris and George Pickens' value the rest of the season.
Yeah. And, this is now 2 weeks in a row that we've seen a good game from Najee Harris. So earlier in the season, when I said I was done with him, I'm glad I didn't get rid of him and trade him. He's just sat on my bench for the last 2 weeks, but I still have him. So now I can play him again.
You know that when you start him, he's not going to do anything.
Exactly. Because that's how fantasy football works.
Yeah.
All right. We've got 2 games tonight. Chargers, Cardinals, Ravens, Bucks. Hope for some good games. Remember, 2 games on Monday Night Football means if one of them sucks, you can just turn it on to the other one. So that's all we got for today, and we'll try to talk to you again later this week.
Yeah. See you Friday.
Bye.